which there are multiple FPGAs, right? Now, I'm sure the engineering students and faculty would have heard of an FPGA, right? It's a field programmable gate array. So the starting from writing the Verilog code, before understanding the that is, first you understand the scope, then you write your code, you develop the RTL, you implement it on an FPGA board, then you make sure that the board is working in association with other boards in the system. Okay, it calls for a tremendous amount of investment of people and effort of money and brain power. So all of that, this whole design has been conceptualized and done at our office here in Bangalore. There are teams of engineers here who work to design such products, and we are very happy to contribute to Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India. So coming now to you, that is the end user, that is you, the students who are here to listen today about what are the kind of opportunities there are. So if we look around us, right, in everything that we do, in fact, the meeting that we are attending right now is facilitated by electronics. And at the heart of that electronics is the microprocessor or the chip, the IC, integrated circuit. So you've learned about the history and the evolution, starting from vacuum tube to transistor to small scale integration, medium scale integration, large scale, now VLSI, and then ultra very large scale, correct? So wherever we look, there is some VLSI product, right? And there is no running away from VLSI. There is no end to what innovation is possible in VLSI, because you and me as engineers are always looking to innovate. We're always looking to solve people's problems. And what are people's problems? For example, the phones that you use, you always would want something which is better, which is faster, which is smaller, which has more features, which consumes less battery power. Correct? That's the reason why every 1-2 years you keep changing your cell phones, or maybe every 3-4 years you change your laptops. Not only that, if you look in the field of medicine, correct? If you want to go for a scan, a full body, maybe a PET scan or a CT scan, you need to have some kind of chip which will facilitate the processing, the image processing, right? The signal processing from the X-rays or the microwaves which are probing your body, right? You need that to happen at very high resolution and very quickly, right? So there is VLSI everywhere. Correct. We hear of smart cars. We hear now of electric vehicles, and we hear of smart cars, autonomous cars. So, what are the brains behind all of this? It's chips, right? So, VLSI is everywhere, and it is here to stay. And the good news is that you, as maybe 2022 batch engineers, 2023 batch engineers, the future for you in VLSI is there. Even as a fresh graduate, without you having to do a master's degree, you can get into this VLSI industry. You can be a success. There are a few challenges though, right? The primary challenge is that industry expects much more than what you have in your syllabus, correct? And the way that we go through our engineering studies, I'll be honest with you, I also went through the same experience. You also are probably going through the same experience. We go through engineering in order to get a degree. We don't go through engineering with the objective of getting a job and being successful at it. Okay, very many of us. So there is that little gap which industry sees, and that's one of the major reasons why the semiconductor companies don't directly go and recruit from campus in the same way that IT companies do. IT, if you see, it's far simpler, because you can take a mechanical engineer, you can take a civil engineer, you can take a BCom graduate, you can take a BA graduate. You can train them in the basic coding skills of C, C++, Java, whatever, the IT languages, correct? But it requires you who understand circuits, right? You've been through 3 years of circuit-based teaching, of circuit-based subjects. It requires only you who can understand analog and digital circuits, because at the heart of VLSI is this analog and digital circuit. If you do not understand circuits, you cannot get into VLSI. It's as simple as that, correct? So that's the advantage that you have as electronics and communication engineers. And you got to leverage that, right? Because there is a huge market, right? And there is tremendous demand, but the supply is not always there. Basic economics. There should be a balance between demand and supply. Okay. Now the demand is there for high quality engineers. The supply, there are engineers, but are they high quality? That depends on you. So I just covered this. We are looking at how to compress technology, add in more features, and to get things at a smaller footprint. Footprint is the area that is occupied by your chip. So earlier we had multiple chips on a PCB, correct? But now we are trying to get all of those systems. It could be the processor, it could be the memory, it could be the signal processing co-processor, correct? And the interfaces, right? All of those things we are trying to put into one chip, a single chip, right? We call that as an SoC, or a system on chip. So that is the challenge that you and me as VLSI engineers are facing. This you must be aware of. There are basically two types of chips. One is ASIC and one is FPGA, right? So ASIC stands for, can anybody tell me what ASIC stands for? What is the full form of ASIC? Anybody? Full form of ASIC? I'd like to hear some voices. Or you could type it out.
Application specific integrated circuits.
Excellent, excellent. Good answer. And what's the beauty of an ASIC? Why do companies why any reason why companies would choose to design an ASIC? Or I'll put it this way: where do we see ASICs? Anyone? Where do we see ASICs? Okay, the short answer to this is we see ASICs everywhere. Anything which is any chip which is mass produced, correct? When I say mass produced, it's like the millions. Anything which is mass produced, that chip is an ASIC. So every single chip on your cell phone, every single chip on your laptop, it's all an ASIC, right? So which are the ASIC companies? Now, if I ask you, you'll tell me. Intel is an ASIC company, Qualcomm, correct? Texas Instruments, they're all ASIC companies because the chips that they manufacture, they're all mass produced. Okay, so an ASIC is because it is everywhere around us. The economics of that is that each chip will cost much less compared to an FPGA. It's called again economy of scale. The more you produce, the cheaper will be the chip per unit. That means each chip will be cheaper compared to something which is limited production. Okay, that's basic economics. All right. So an ASIC, because it is everywhere, its unit cost is much lesser. All right. Now in an ASIC, if we look at the flow of how the chip is conceptualized, that means from design up till silicon, if we look at how the flow is, correct? The one thing that stands out is at the beginning, when we start our design, there is no silicon. Silicon is available only at the end. Okay. Silicon is obtained from the manufacturing fab, from the fabrication plant. And that's where you get the silicon. All right. Now, from design till silicon in ASIC flow, it can easily take 6 to 7 months. It can be years. It can be 2 to 3, 4 years as well. Okay, the cycle time, that means from design till silicon, it can take years. That's the time taken. All right. Not only that, the effort in terms of manpower is huge because, as you see, there are multiple steps, and each step requires a dedicated team of engineers. Each step requires a dedicated set of software tools, EDA products we spoke about, right? It requires dedicated tools. Okay, so there is investment, huge investment in terms of time, in terms of effort, in terms of money. All right. And another disadvantage of this is, suppose we complete all of these steps and we get silicon. If by chance there is a bug, a functional bug maybe in silicon, all of that years of effort, months of effort, billions of dollars of money, the time of all of those engineers, all of that is waste. Because if the bug is in silicon, you cannot change silicon. You'll have to go back to maybe RTL design, you'll maybe have to go back to synthesis stage, but you cannot easily fix a bug in silicon. That's one of the major disadvantages of the ASIC. All right. Many years ago, I don't know if some of you would have read about it. There was a bug in the Pentium processor. So Pentium was one of the maybe around the year 2000 2005, around that time, the Pentium chip from Intel, right? It had a floating point bug. Some of the faculty members might remember. Okay, so that led to a lot of embarrassment for Intel, because some minute uh, some when calculating at some numbers, when it was multiplying, right, there was a one digit mistake or something in a lookup table, and that led to a huge change in the final computation of some very high calculations. Okay, so that was a big bug, and Intel had to face a lot of criticism for the way it handled that bug. All right, so a bug in silicon is extremely dangerous for the reputation of an organization. That's why typically the design times, right, go into multiple months or multiple years. All right. So if you look at this RTL design, I think something you would have covered as part of your studies. I'm sure you, after digital electronics, you've learned maybe an HDL like Verilog or VHDL, correct? So that is what RTL design is about. You're trying to capture the functionality in some kind of a code or some kind of a language. So typically HDLs like Verilog or VHDL you would use to do RTL design. And you'll do some amount of simulation. Simulation means you're applying certain inputs, observing the behavior, capturing the outputs, and trying to compare the outputs which you get against some reference output. Okay, the golden output. And if there is a match, then you say, okay, my design is meeting its requirement. If there is a mistake, that means there's a bug in my code, I'll have to go back and debug. So I look at a code again, I look at a waveform, and I'll try to figure out where I'm going wrong in my design. I'll try to fix it again, and then rerun simulation until I get an all clear. Okay, so companies spend a lot of time in this ASIC flow. Companies spend a lot of time in verification, that is simulation. It's a critical component. All right. Now that we have code, the next step is synthesis. Now, synthesis is the process of converting your code, Verilog or VHDL code, into gates. Okay, so gates we all know, there's AND gate, OR gate, MUX, inverter, NOR, NAND, XOR, XNOR, all of those MUXes, all of those are there, right? So we need to have some tools which will look at the code, which will understand, okay, this is the objective behind writing the code, this is the gates which are inferred. So that process is called synthesis. All right. Now the interesting thing here is, even though it's an ASIC flow, there is this FPGA synthesis. Correct? FPGA, you all know, it is field programmable gate array. Now, why is this FPGA in the middle of ASIC flow, if you ask me? That's because what ASIC companies do is, the beauty of an FPGA is it is reprogrammable, correct? Right? So what companies do is, they will first see the functionality of their design on FPGA. Correct? They will see whether it's working or not in the FPGA silicon. And if it is working, then well and good, then we'll continue. Else we'll debug it at the FPGA stage itself, so that when we get finally continuing the process and finally when we get silicon, we need to have it bug free. So all the bugs that we want to find, let us find it in FPGA itself, because an FPGA is reprogrammable. All right. Okay. So once we have got the netlist, that is the gate level description, then we can get into the transistor stage. So transistors and then layout stage, we'll do a lot of checks in the verification of the layout stage itself. It has to be If we have to say that it is layout clean, then it has to keep to certain rules that the foundry expects. Okay, so those processes are taken care of in transistor level verification. Finally, once the design is clean, that means it is functionally clean, it is physically clean, only then that information goes to the fabrication plant. And there in the fabrication plant, you must have learned there's a lot of processes. Again, there is masking, etching, photolithography, so many things are there, correct? So all of that happens in the fabrication plant. Now, if you ask me, in India does not have very credible manufacturing capability as of now. The government is working towards it, but it will take some time, correct? Most of the design work, correct, the RTL design work, the verification part of it, the physical verification, physical design part of it, a lot of that happens very much here in India. And a lot of the ASIC companies, you take Intel, you take Qualcomm, right? All of those have a major presence here in Bangalore and in Hyderabad as well. There are also a lot of semiconductor companies in Noida. So these, I could say, are the three main hubs for semiconductor companies: Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Noida. So you will find in these companies that there are multiple teams which are working on design, which are working on verification, and which are working on physical design or physical verification. All right. So there's a lot of scope for fresh engineers in all of these domains. And if you have the skills of design, that is analog design or digital design, if you have an HDL skill like Verilog, like VHDL, you will be successful in RTL design. If you have system Verilog skills, UVM, Universal Verification Methodology skills, you can be very good at verification. If you understand CMOS, if you understand the circuits, analog circuits, right, you can do very well as a physical design engineer or a physical verification engineer. Okay, so these are typically the four entry-level positions that you can expect in this ASIC flow. Does anyone have any questions at this point of time about the ASIC flow? Any doubts you have? Please feel free to ask. I'll pause for a few minutes. Any questions on ASIC flow? Okay. Any question?
Yeah. Mr. Arun, as
Yes.
myself, Ramakrishna, as I don't have any doubts on the flow of it. Generally,
Yeah.
the students from the Lilo Engineering College, we are from the Lilo Engineering College, we are
Yes.
desperately looking for the opportunities we are from the core sector, embedded systems and VLSI. But the thing is,
Yeah.
we are getting the more companies, the people are attracting towards it. Like I'm happy, like you shared some of your experience. What is the environment we have in the uh, chip companies like Intel and others, and service oriented companies like a software, who are eligible for it? What is the eligibility for them? What is the eligibility for the chip-based companies? Also, you explained. And
Yeah.
moreover, like, I hope, like, because the people will attract towards it. We are desperately trying to convert the people to think about to get a job and something in the chip-based companies. I'm very thankful for that. Like you're clear the doubts of the students in you, but I don't have anything in the six, but the student may interact with you, I guess. Yeah, I
Please.
right, Mr. I just I appeal to students that like you feel free to raise many number of the questions in it and make the things clear for you, right? Thank you, Ar. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like some students maybe to ask questions also.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm sorry.
So as engineers, you should be curious. You see this diagram here, right? So you should, if you don't have questions, that means you would know everything about it or nothing about it. If you know nothing about it or you know something about it, you should ask questions. An engineer should be programmed to think and question, correct? I may not have the answer right now, but you should ask the question. Okay, we'll go ahead for now, and I'm sure some questions will come up. Okay, so we've seen this ASIC flow. We'll look now at the FPGA flow. All right, FPGA stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. Programmability, that is the beauty of the FPGA. That's what differentiates the ASIC from the FPGA, correct? Programmable means I can have a design, maybe a full adder, half adder, whatever, some basic labs that you must be doing, right? You'll write a counter maybe. Now, multiple students will be working on the same evaluation board, targeting the same FPGA. Now, if it was an ASIC, first of all, it would have taken you months to realize it in silicon. And once you have a full adder in ASIC, you cannot change its functionality. You can't make it even from a full adder, you can't make it as a full half adder, correct? But the beauty of the FPGA is you can have it working as a full adder in 1 minute, and maybe after 5 minutes, you have it working as something totally different. Okay. And if you look at the steps, the kind of iterations that there are very, very few compared to the ASIC flow. So it's as simple as you write your code, you do some basic amount of verification, then you take it through synthesis process. Synthesis again will convert your code into gates. Then there is an implementation process. Now, what is this implementation? It goes back to when you start your design in FPGA flow, you already have silicon ready. Unlike ASIC, where you got silicon from the fab. Here, when you begin your design itself, you have silicon, you can hold it in your hand. All right. Now, what is inside that silicon? If you look at, you can see the layout view of the silicon also. There are tools which will allow you to do so. So if you look at inside the FPGA, there are already something like gates. They're called resources. It's not exactly like AND gate, OR gate, MUX, XOR, and all of that. But there are something called lookup table. There is something called a MUX. There is something called a flip-flop. That is already there in silicon in an FPGA. All right. So what your implementation does is it looks at the gates, which are the output of the synthesis. It looks at what is available on the FPGA already, and it tries to map the gates from synthesis to the resources of an FPGA. It tries to match it and it tries to implement it. Okay. That's what implementation is about. And then finally, you have device programming, where maybe you'll connect a USB cable to your evaluation board to your laptop. Okay. And you have a bit stream, and that bit stream contains the information of what gate is connected to what resource in the FPGA. All right. So that device programming is finally where all that magic happens. You have that now working on FPGA. Okay. So the flow is very similar and very, very simple. And because it is iterative, you can do multiple times. That's why companies use an FPGA as part of the ASIC design flow. They do something called ASIC prototyping on an FPGA. So even if you look at a company which is a pure ASIC, you have Intel, you have Qualcomm and all of that, right? You have AMD. All of that will invest heavily in prototyping. So they will invest in FPGA, correct? And they will test their designs extensively on FPGA before getting into ASIC flow. Okay. So if you have experience or if you have worked with FPGAs, then you can be a successful at a pure FPGA company. You can be successful even in an ASIC company. That's the beauty of knowing the architecture, knowing about an FPGA and about how the flow of the FPGA design process is. Okay. Now, ASIC, I told you, is mass produced. FPGA is not as mass produced as an ASIC, but it has specific applications. Now, let us take, for example, the domain where Corel is working, right? We work with the defense in designing radar systems. You and I don't have radar systems at home, correct? You don't have a radar system outside your classroom which will scan and see, okay, HOD is coming, we should keep quiet, correct? So it's not mass produced. You can find it maybe in 100 or 1,000 installations, or maybe maximum 4,000-5,000 installations across India, correct? So it does not make sense for an ASIC to be deployed like this. We can't manufacture an ASIC for maybe 4,000-5,000 units, correct? So that's where an FPGA company comes into the picture, where with limited production, you can still have your design working. All right. So FPGA companies mostly would work with something which is in lower volume, not in millions of design. Okay. So that's why you would find it in radar systems. You will find it in medical imaging, correct? those are the places where you'd use FPGAs. Okay. So irrespective of whether you're targeting an ASIC or an FPGA, you would continue to do design, you would continue to do verification. All right. So they are chip dependent activities. You still have to know Verilog, you still have to know system Verilog. And you can be a success in both ASIC side as well as for an FPGA company. Okay. Now, a few slides ago, I spoke about an SoC, a system on chip. Now, what is a system, if you ask me? It is a complete solution. And what is a complete solution? A solution is something which has a hardware part as well as a software part. Now, you and I don't buy an Intel processor just on Amazon. We don't buy it as it is, correct? We look for a complete solution. What is a solution for us? That processor should be on a motherboard. That motherboard should be on a box. It should be inside something which is usable. Not only that, we need to also have some kind of operating system to run it, correct? So if you look at a company like Dell or HP, they give you a complete solution, correct? They give you the hardware, which is your Intel processor or AMD processor. They also give you software. It may be running Windows 10, 11, whatever. It could be running Ubuntu, correct? So it's a complete system. It's a complete solution which we can just switch on and start working, right? So a system will comprise of both the hardware part as well as the software part, and the same is true in VLSI as well. So when we talk of an embedded engineer, very often, or if not all the time, we're talking about both hardware as well as software, right? And an embedded engineer will have the idea that, okay, I'm writing a C program, an embedded C program, and it is targeting a specific hardware. I need to know my hardware flow, and I will also go through my software design flow. I will have generated an ELF file, which is the end result of the software flow. I will have also got a bitstream, which is the end result of hardware flow. And that ELF file as well as bitstream, I can program into the single device. And then I have a complete system working. All right. So this is also very much in demand because, as I said earlier, we are moving from individual islands like chips to systems on chips. Okay, SoC. Okay. So where do you stand right now? 2022 batch, in maybe 5-6 months from now, you should be out of college with a bachelor's degree. You should be looking for jobs. And if for example, an IT company comes to your campus and recruits you, you'll just end up with a software engineer position. But in VLSI and embedded systems, there's a whole range of entry-level positions or designations that you can find. Okay, you can be a front-end design engineer, you can be a physical design engineer, you can be a verification engineer. The kind of skill set that you need is again very, very narrowed down. You on the right side, I've put the kind of skills that are required. It's not a one-to-one match. It's a one-to-many match. So, for example, if you want to be a front-end design engineer, you should know digital circuits thoroughly. You should know HDL thoroughly, Verilog or VHDL. If you know scripting, that's a bonus. If you want to be a back-end design engineer, you should know not only digital circuits, analog circuits also you should know. You should know scripting thoroughly. You need not know HDL that much, but if you know very well and good. But scripting is a must. I'm sure you've heard of scripting languages like Python, like shell programming, like Perl, right? So if it's not taught to you in engineering, you should look at learning this by yourself. There are a lot of opportunity, a lot of options available for you online. There are a lot of courses which teach you. You need not go through a course, but a course is much more structured compared to you just listening to videos. Okay. If you want to be an FPGA design engineer, and that's what differentiates you. Okay. So the FPGA design engineer has an edge compared to a basic RTL design engineer, because RTL design engineer will just write the code, but an FPGA design engineer will actually take that code and take it through silicon on an FPGA, right? So that is the advantage of being an FPGA design engineer. Verification engineer, I told you, in any ASIC company, there's a lot of investment, a lot of requirements for verification compared to design, maybe, because design can be done, right? Complex design can be done. But a design is only as good if it is certified, if it is verified thoroughly. Correct. Now we hear of multi-million gate designs, right? In your engineering, you must have done some labs where you wrote a half adder. Half adder has two inputs and two outputs. If you look at the truth table of the half adder, you have four possible inputs, correct? And if you give those four possible inputs, you have four possible outputs, and you can sorry, you can verify quickly whether your design is working or not. But when you talk of designs which have, let us say, 100, 200 inputs, you need 2 power 100, 2 power 200 kind of possible inputs. And I'm not just talking in terms at a time, right? You will have to give continuous inputs in order to get output after some clock cycles, correct? So the kind of verification challenge that there is humongous, is huge. So you would have written a Verilog test bench maybe to verify your half adder. But when you look at complex designs with 100, 200 inputs, you cannot depend on a Verilog test bench. So that's where industry has moved towards a HVL, hardware verification language, like System Verilog. Okay. So if you, after completing your engineering studies, have this skill with you of not just learning Verilog, you also know System Verilog. Or if you know a little more than System Verilog, something called UVM. If you have that skill with you, correct, then your effect, your demand in industry as a verification engineer, that automatically goes up. Okay. A DFT engineer, a DFT is not discrete Fourier transform, it is designed for testability. Okay, so DFT again is an ASIC terminology. It kind of sees how you can test your design against manufacturing defects. Correct. We spoke about how the design is taken to the fab, and where all this masking, photolithography, etching, all of those processes happen, right? Suppose there is a mistake in that. Suppose a bug is introduced during manufacturing. How do I detect that bug? Correct. If I have two inputs of an AND gate and by mistake they are shorted when manufacturing, right? Simulation is fine before it is given to the fab, but during manufacturing, both the inputs are shorted. What happens is my output remains either high or low depending on what is applied as the input, correct? So it does not work as an AND gate. Now, how do I test against that? So that is the role of a DFT engineer. Now that again has a lot of demand, because as we are shrinking technology, we're getting from 180 nanometer. When I started my career, it was 180 nanometer. Now we're getting into 4 nanometer, 3 nanometer, and all that, right? So as we're shrinking technology, there could be more and more manufacturing bugs which come in, right? So DFT engineer is responsible for catching those bugs. Then you have application engineer. Application engineer works with customers, understands their needs, comes back to the design team and says, see, this is the issue that they're facing. What is it that we can innovate and give as a solution? Post-silicon validation engineer is responsible for testing the design, testing the chip before it is given to the customer for use. Okay. And then of course you have embedded design and embedded test engineer who take care of the software part of the SoC design. All right. So these are very, very niche requirements. It's not as common as software engineer that you have in IT. They have very, very high expectations. So we do study digital circuits, we do study analog circuits. Some universities cover HDL like Verilog. C programming is common. We learn that maybe in first year of engineering. Microprocessor, microcontroller, we also learn. Not many of us may know Linux, but industry works only on Linux. Okay, because of its stability, because of its ease, because of its capability, the scripting capability, right? So you should learn Linux. It's very simple, very easy to learn, but you should learn it. Okay. So these are the kind of skill set that is expected from industry if you are looking to aspire in VLSI or semiconductor domain or in embedded domain. So if you have any specific questions about this slide, about designations or skill set, please go ahead and ask me. I'll wait for a few minutes. You could feel free to type your message out in chat also in case you don't have an audio device. I'd love to hear some questions. Questions, designations, expected skill set. Do you guys study Verilog in your course or VHDL?
Sir,
Which semester do you study this in?
4-1, sir.
4-1. Okay, so you're studying it right now, right? Final year students are studying it now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So do you learn about blocking and non-blocking assignments?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Very good. Can one of you tell me what is the difference? When would I use blocking? When would I use non-blocking? Pardon?
The blocking assignments are the assignments which are used to step-by-step inspection, one inspection completion, and after that, we are going to another inspection.
For non-blocking means more than one condition if there is, we will use non-blocking.
When more than one condition, I didn't get you. Could you please repeat that? I only heard up till when more than one condition.
Non-blocking are used for sequence execution, sir. It's concurrency. So,
Concurrent, excellent, excellent. So that's a right word to use. So there is. I hope you're not referring to a textbook, right?
no, sir.
Anyway, no. Okay, very good. What's your name, please?
My name is Bhanu, sir.
Bhanu, is it? Okay, Bhanu gave the right word. So when you're going for an interview, also, right? It's important that you use the right word. Basically, an HDL, Verilog or VHDL, they support concurrency compared to a sequentially executing language like C, right? So the non-blocking assignment, that is the less than and equal to symbol, that is the assignment which supports and which infers concurrency. All right. So do we use a non-blocking assignment for a combinational circuit or a sequential circuit? Anyone?
I think it's for a combination circuit, sir.
Okay, what is a combinational circuit? What is a sequential circuit? This even third year students can understand, can answer. Yeah, go ahead.
This combination circuit means its output depending upon only the inputs, sir, present inputs, and
Okay.
it does not have any feedback or memory to store the previous output.
Very
Sequential
good.
means that are storing some data and giving the feedback for the output, sir. So it was depending upon previous output and present input.
Very good. Very good. So now when you say it depends only on previous, when a combinational circuit only depends on present input, correct? Correct. So
Okay.
would you use blocking assignment or non-blocking assignment?
So non-blocking also we can use, sir, because it was not depending upon the past or previous version.
Okay. Okay. So if you want to model a sequential circuit, which one would you use? For a sequential circuit, we'll use blocking or non-blocking?
Blocking, sir.
Okay. Okay. I think you've got it mixed up. For a combinational circuit, you will use blocking, and for a sequential circuit, you will use non-blocking. Okay, that's how it is. What you could do is, if you draw a counter, for example, or a shift register, correct? If you draw the circuit of a shift register, 4-bit shift register, if you see, correct, you have the output of one shift register of one flip flop, which is going to D input of the next flip flop, correct? And that carries on as a chain. So you have an input which is going to D input, output Q is going to D of the next flop. Like that, if you arrange 4, now if you're trying to write the code corresponding to that, correct, at every clock, at every passage of clock, you want the output, the D to get into Q, correct? So you want it to happen all at the same time. You don't want the input which has come in to go to Q, then to Q to D, Q to D to Q. You don't want it to happen at a stretch, correct? You want one output to go to one input only, correct? So that has to happen concurrently. So that's the simplest way of remembering that a sequential circuit requires non-blocking assignment. A combinational, for example, if you take 2 or 3 gates, if you draw them in sequence, input which you give at the beginning will, at the with just the gate delay, it will get to the output of the last gate, correct? And that's whatever you give as input, it should go through the gates one by one, correct? And it should finally reflect in the output. So that has to happen at one shot, correct? So there you would use blocking assignment. So combinational is always blocking, sequential is always non-blocking. Okay, keep that in mind. You can go revise your notes again, look up some website maybe if required, but you get that conceptually right in your mind, that for a combinational circuit you'll use blocking assignment, sequential circuit you'll use non-blocking assignment. These basics you have to be thorough with if you are going to any company for interview. Okay. Okay, some other common questions. I don't want to extend this. You can just make a note, right? Since you're learning Verilog, what is the difference between reg and wire? When would you use reg? When would you use wire? You have to remember that when we are studying HDL, so that finally we get a digital circuit out of it, correct? So when we model hardware, there are 3 or 4 modeling styles, right? There is structural, there's data flow, there is behavioral, there is gate level, that is transistor level, right? So when we depending on what we are trying to infer, the hardware that we are trying to infer, according to that hardware, we have to model accordingly, correct? So if we want a flip flop, we will write behavioral modeling. If we want to have just some adders or something like that, we can use data flow. And accordingly, the signals we will have to declare using reg or wire. Correct. Wire will always be used for combinational. Reg you can use both as combinational as well as sequential. There are some procedural blocks like always that you have to keep in mind. So remember all of those basic concepts. Keep always this thing in mind that you are modeling, your end result is hardware. So keep hardware in mind when you are writing your code. Don't just learn Verilog syntactically. Okay, keep always hardware in mind. That's my advice to you. Okay, so moving on, I spoke about Sandeepni at the beginning, the training division of Corel. You've heard of Xilinx. You must have used a Xilinx tool, or you would have used an evaluation board also from Xilinx. So when Xilinx, in fact, came first to India, right, they partnered with us right from that time, and they set up, in fact, their office was running from our office. We are one of 26 authorized training providers for Xilinx across the world. And because of this close association with Xilinx, any organization, it can be academic, it can be a professional organization like a defense lab or a private sector company, any company or any university which is using Xilinx or intends to use Xilinx products, they will get training done through Sandeepani. All right, so we have done a lot of training programs for the defense labs which are using FPGAs, Xilinx FPGAs. We do a lot of training programs for private companies which are using FPGAs either for defense or for ASIC prototyping. We do a lot of programs for colleges, right? We do for students, for faculty, for research scholars. We have a lot of training programs. So in corporate training, that means I spoke about organizational training. We do a lot of training programs across different domains. So there is language like Verilog, VHDL, System Verilog. Then there is FPGA architectures. For example, most colleges use Spartan boards, right? Spartan 3, Spartan 6. But industry has moved beyond 6 series to 7 series and even beyond that. So we do a lot of workshops and programs in 7 series FPGA, ultra scale plus, right? So these are the hot things in the FPGA space. Then there is something called Versal, which is not even a year old. Okay. Vivado is the tool, the EDA tool associated with Xilinx FPGA flow. You must have used ISC. ISC Xilinx has stopped support for in the last 7-8 years, right? So Vivado design suite is what we teach. Then the concept of an SoC, Zinc 7000 is the entry-level system on chip solution from Xilinx. Then there is MPSoC, RFSoC, multi-processor system on chip, radio frequency system on chip. The tool for that is Vitis. Embedded system design using Vitis. HLS is high-level synthesis. So these are very, very complex things. Even here, taking care of the team, I'm amazed at the kind of capability, at the kind of innovation that a company like Xilinx has brought into the market. Okay, it's just unbelievable, the kind of technology that there is that we get exposed to. But sadly, this has not gone down to the academic level. See, colleges, many of them still are working on Spartan 3 and Spartan 6, right? If the colleges were to ramp up and were to come up to the level of entry level industry standards like Vivado and 7 series, then you as the engineers of tomorrow would have that definite advantage compared to other tier 3 or tier 4 colleges. Okay, so in corporate training, right? So in addition to defense customers, we do a lot of training for private customers. Some of these companies would be known to you. So now in student training, right? So we do a lot of training programs for those in college, those who are studying currently, maybe in their pre-final year or final year. And we also do an intensive program for fresh engineers who have completed their studies. So for 2023 batch, that means those who are in 3-1 now, you could, or even 4-1, right? You could look at doing an internship program with us. So currently this is all online. Before the pandemic began, that is up till Jan of 2020, we were doing internship programs at our office here in Bangalore. So the beauty of our internship programs, it's very hands-on. So we allow the students to download tool directly from Xilinx website. You get a trial license. You get to work hands-on with an FPGA board. We'll give you a demo in a short while from now. Okay, and we give you exposure to the tools and the evaluation boards which are current and hot in industry. Okay, System Verilog is again one of the internship programs that we are. In fact, one batch is starting today. So those of you who want to get a head start in verification, you could consider doing this internship program, which is starting today. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that from now. Those in final year. Yep. Is there a question? Could you please mute, please? Okay. So, somebody is to mute from there. Okay. So those of you from final year, right, 4-1 who want to get into industry after your graduation, you could look at doing our professional development course. So the internship programs that we have, one of them is starting today. In fact, it's not 30th of November, it's 6th of December. The functional verification using System Verilog. It is not 30th of November. Okay, so this internship program is starting today, 6th of December. Okay, it is a 1 month program. It is you will be able to download the industry standard Questa Sim software. Will give you a license to use this Questa Sim. Questa Sim is an advanced version of Model Sim. In case some of you have used Model Sim, it has a lot of verification-friendly advantages compared to Model Sim. It supports System Verilog and UVM. So this program is starting today. Next Monday, we have digital system design using Vivado internship program, which is starting. So both of these are 1 month program. Daily, there will be 1 to 1.5 hours of live interactive session. That would be in the evenings, usually 5 or 5:30 p.m. After your academic classes are over in college. So it would be a very good opportunity for you not only to get a certificate of internship, but also to get a head start as far as your resume is concerned. Correct. So if you do a small project through these internship programs, if and when you are applying to colleges, to companies, once you complete your graduation, right? Because you have written every single line of